prizes can be a bit of a hit and miss, for me at least, which is why I try not to be guided by them too much. But last year, something happened. Hello, amazing humans on the net. My name is Paulina Maria, and we are here to talk about books. If you like my content, why not consider subscribing? It really helps my small channel. Now, if you watched my video on the best books I read in 2024, you will know that the winner of last year's Women's Prize for Fiction was also my winning book. And you may think, so what? It was also the best book for millions of other people. True, but on a personal level, this was the first time when an award-winning book was also my winning book. So I decided to pull together a list of all the book winners since the inception of Women's Prize for Fiction, just to see if there are any other books that I might potentially love. And as I was doing it, I thought maybe you'll find it useful too. As usual, I promise there'll be no spoilers in this video. Let's dive in. So the first one up is the book from 1996 titled A Spell of Winter by Helen Dunmore. This is set around the time of World War I and is about teenage sister and brother, Kathy and Rob, who don't have their parents, and so they lead this quiet and isolated life in their grandfather's decaying estate, and inevitably they develop a very close bond. It is written from the perspective of Catherine and is supposed to be full of atmosphere and rich writing and an exploration of complex themes such as loneliness, our desire to cling to the past, and to the way things were. This is definitely one of those mood over plot type of books, so if that's what you like, then do check it out. In 1997, the winning novel was Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. I can tell you I will definitely be reading this one simply because the book is written by a Canadian author and the main protagonist is Polish, and I'm Polish and my husband is Canadian. So we follow Jacob Beer, who is 7 years old. He's a Polish Jew who witnessed the Nazis storming his house and basically killing his whole family. But he manages to escape after being rescued by a Greek geologist, and they both later move to Canada, where Jacob becomes a poet and a translator. That's one part of the story, and there's a second part of the story told from a perspective of a 20-year-old Ben, big fan of Jacob's poetry, who decides to help find his lost journals. And so we've got a reflection on traumatic past and the healing power of language and the healing power of love. 1998, we have Larry's Party by Carol Shields. This novel is a chronicle of the life of Larry Weller, who is a garden maze maker, and as we follow him through his 20s and 30s and 40s, we delve into his relationships, career, and personal growth over several decades. I have read somewhere that Carol Shields is the master of the ordinary. I quite like the sound of that, and so this book, through the lens of this ordinary man's life, reflects on male condition, men's fears, disappointments, and his struggle for self-identity and self-knowledge. Next, we have the winner from 1999, and that is a book by Suzanne Berne titled A Crime in the Neighborhood. This book, as the title suggests, is about a murder. This is a murder of a 12-year-old boy, which happened in a suburban community in the 70s. The narrator here is Marsha, who is now an adult, but she was very much part of that community, and she was 10 years old when the murder happened. And so here we have this underlying suspense centered around the question, who killed this 12-year-old boy? But apparently this book is actually about Marsha and how her broken family and her broken community let her down and influenced the rest of her life. And we are entering the 21st century with the winning book from 2000, and this book was by Linda Grant, titled When I Lived in modern times. Here we follow Evelyn, a 20-year-old Jewish woman from London who is a hairdresser and who moves to Tel Aviv in 1946, so just after the war, and there she obviously navigates complexities of the birth of a new nation, but also of love and the self-identity. This is described as an unsentimental coming-of-age story of both a country and a young immigrant, which I think very beautifully sums it up. The Idea of Perfection by Kate Grenville was the winning book of 2001. This is set in a small Australian town where two awkward outsiders, a bridge engineer and a quilter, form an unexpected romantic connection. And there is also a subplot in this book about a local bank manager's wife who learns that the local butcher is in love with her. And so we have these low-key romances in a tiny, hot town in New South Wales, which doesn't sound very exciting, but the book is described as whimsical and quietly brilliant and having that honest look at relationships. That sounds interesting to me, so I might actually pick it up. Oh, and also one interesting fact about this book. Apparently, Kate Grenville was inspired to write this book, having read a quote by Leonardo da Vinci, which says, "An arch is two weaknesses which together make a strength." Moving on to the following year, and the winning book from 2002 was Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. This is set during a hostage crisis in an unnamed South American country, and we follow both terrorists and captives who form these unexpected bonds. This is a book that I actually started and never finished. Even though I loved The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, for some reason this book did not appeal to me, despite it being loved by many people out there. I found the beginning very difficult to get through. You have got these days passing and nothing really happening, so the focus is definitely on characters, but they just didn't grab me. I wonder if this book caters for people who love opera, because one of the key characters is a soprano and the music is one of the layers of the bond that is formed between the captives and the terrorists. Let me know if I should give it another try. Okay, we are in 2003 and we have Property by Valerie Martin. Set in 1828 Louisiana, the story is told from the perspective of Manon, a plantation wife who despises her husband, who is crude and dull and is infatuated with one of the women slaves. And so this book is supposed to explore themes of slavery, ownership and power dynamics as well. When I was doing my research about this book, I read somewhere that there is a bit of an echo of Scarlett O'Hara in Manon, although much less romanticized, but they're supposed to share the same toughness and the same moral blindness and also casual cruelty. 2004, and the winning novel that year was Small Island by Andrea Levy. The novel intertwines the lives of Jamaican immigrants and Londoners in post-war Britain. This is post-World War II, addressing issues of racism, identity, and belonging. I have this book in my library. This was one of my great second-hand finds, and I am definitely reading it. Next, we have We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. This book won the award in 2005 and sounds like another heavy read, because this book is a series of letters written by Eva to her estranged husband about her difficult relationship with her son Kevin, who 2 years earlier committed a school massacre. Obviously, this book is so timely because of its topic. School shootings have been making headlines for the last 20 years. And so we have this book, which is a commentary on nature versus nurture. 2006, On Beauty by Zadie Smith. Here we have two families living in a New England college town. One family is very liberal, the other family is very conservative, and so we watch them as they experience this cultural and political clash. I am ashamed to admit that I started and never finished White Teeth by Zadie Smith, despite loving her writing, which I found very penetrative and funny and witty. Zadie is clearly a great intellectual, but I found myself not very invested in the characters and found this story a bit dry, despite its brilliant hook at the beginning. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. I am personally not sure about this one. I feel like maybe I should give it another try. Please let me know if you've read it and how you feel about this book and whether I should give it another go. Next, we have a winner from 2007, and that was Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This book is set against the backdrop of the Nigerian Civil War, and we follow the lives and personal and political upheavals of three characters. We have a young houseboy, a university professor, and a British expatriate, all of which become intertwined. This author is supposed to be a wonderful storyteller, and this book is definitely going on my TBR, and after I'm done with the book, I will definitely be watching the movie. In 2008, the prize was won by The Road Home by Rose Tremain. Here we follow Lev, an Eastern European immigrant who, after his wife dies, travels to London and is seeking work to support his mother and his daughter, whom he left back in the country. And while in London, not surprisingly, he needs to confront the challenges of displacement, cultural differences, but also a clash between an idealized version of the wealthy West that he had in his mind versus the reality he actually experiences. So this book is supposed to give us a very humanized, as opposed to stereotypical version of an immigrant. And as an Eastern European immigrant who came to London over 20 years ago, I will definitely be reading it. Next, we have Home by Marilynne Robinson. This is supposed to be a companion novel to another novel by the same author titled Gilead, in which we follow three generations of fathers and sons. And so in this novel Home, we have the daughter of one of the characters from Gilead return to her hometown to care for her dying father, and later she is also joined by her troubled brother Jag. And so in this book they both grapple with faith and also with forgiveness. If you like the kind of writing that is melancholic and sensitive and slow, which is what Robinson's writing is supposed to be like, then you might want to check out this book. Phew, I think we're halfway through. I hope you're still here. By the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video that absolutely no AI was involved in pulling this video together. I have done my own research on each and every single book, taking care to not include any spoilers, but at the same time to give you as much of the necessary information possible so that you can make a decision for yourself whether any of these books are the books that you would like to read or not. If you are still here, please consider subscribing. It really helps my small channel. Right. Back to the list. We are in 2010 and the winning novel was by the only author who won the Women's Prize for Fiction twice in the history of Women's Prize for Fiction, and that author is Barbara Kingsolver, and the winning novel from 2010 was her novel titled The Lacuna. In The Lacuna, we follow Harrison Shepherd, who has an American father and a Mexican mother, and as he spends time in both countries, he happens to work for both Frida Kahlo as a cook and also for Leon Trotsky as a plaster mixer. And he later becomes a writer of historical novels for which he is politically prosecuted. I love the premise of this book because I love Frida Kahlo, and so on that basis I will be reading this book. Moving on, we are in 2011 and the winning book was The Tiger's Wife by Tia Obreht. Here we follow Natalia, a young doctor who embarks on a journey to reconstruct her dead grandfather's stories. This is set in the Balkan country that is adjusting to life after the war, so we have commentary on aftershock of conflict, old enmities, also on fatalism and on superstition. This book is supposed to be great for those of you who are fans of folklore, magical realism and mystery. Next we have a book which has been talked about a lot here on YouTube, and that book is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which won the award in 2012. This is a retelling of the Iliad from the perspective of Patroclus, who was a warrior and he was sent to Troy, where he and Achilles forged this very strong bond. I understand that in this book, even though we do have the Trojan War as the backdrop, the actual focus of the book is on that relationship between Patroclus and Achilles. I have read the other book by the same author, which is retelling of the myth of Circe, and that was one of the best books I read last year. I loved Miller's writing. I love how she empowers her characters, and I will definitely be reading The Song of Achilles at some point. Next winner is from 2013, and that is May We Be Forgiven by A.M. Holmes. Here we follow history professor Harold Silver, whose life is completely upended after a series of personal catastrophes and some bad decision making on his part. And so this book is about his journey of self-discovery as he finds himself caring for his brother's children. This is described as both weird and wonderful, dark and uplifting. I am not entirely convinced, but maybe it sounds like something you would enjoy. Next we have A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Eimear McBride from 2014. So apparently this author wrote this book in 6 months, but then spent 10 years trying to sell it to publishers. And when it was finally published, it immediately won something like 5 awards. So this is told apparently in a very fragmented narrative style, and it delves into the inner life of a young Irish woman who is dealing with the trauma of her brother having cancer during his childhood years. It is also about family relationships, about self-identity, about sexual awakening. Very intense, apparently, and at times brutal, and definitely emotional book. Apparently this is one of those books that you just never forget. The winner of 2015 award was How to Be Both by Ali Smith. This novel is supposed to be quite innovative as it intertwines the stories of a Renaissance artist and a contemporary teenage girl. And so we have themes of art, themes of gender and time. I've run out of tea, so I had to quickly switch to a glass of water. Where were we? Okay, I think we are in 2016. So that year, the winner of Women's Prize for Fiction was the book titled The Glorious Heresies by Lisa McInerney. Apologies in advance for mispronunciation. This is set in post-recession Cork in Ireland, and the novel is supposed to weave together the lives of misfits and criminals who are affected by an accidental murder. How interesting. And so we have themes of family, faith, and the theme of redemption. Next we have The Power by Naomi Alderman. This is a dystopian novel set in a world where women develop this ability to emit electric shocks, leading to a very radical shift in global power dynamics and also in societal structures. I actually have this book because recently my friend Monica has lent it to me. Thank you, Monica. But I didn't realize it won won Women's Prize for Fiction. So yes, I'll definitely be reading it, although I do need a little bit of a break because I've just read 2 dystopian novels recently, 1984 by Orwell and also The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. So yes, a little bit of a break from dystopia, please, and then I'll dive straight into it. The winner of 2018 was Home Fire by Camila Shamsi. This is supposed to be a contemporary reimagining of Antigone. However, apparently you don't have to read or remember Antigone to really appreciate this novel. And so we have this story where we follow a British Muslim family who are torn apart by politics, by love, and also by radicalization. We have a narrative from 5 points of view. We have Isma, who is the daughter of a jihadi who died on the way to Guantanamo, who now lives in the US and is studying PhD and who is also supporting her young siblings. Then we also have Annika, her beautiful younger sister. We also have Annika's fraternal twin. We also have a narrative from the Home Secretary of Pakistan. And finally, we have a narrative from the Home Secretary of Pakistan's son. And so as these 5 narratives progress, we learn about different perspectives on the issues of freedom, citizenship, love, and duty. Lots of reviews describe this book as brutal yet beautiful, and also as political but personal. I will definitely be reading this one. Next, we have a book that I actually have just started reading on Kindle, and that is An American Marriage by Tayari Jones, the book that won the award in 2019. We follow a newlywed couple, Celestial and Roy, and we follow their lives, which are shattered because Roy is wrongfully imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit, and that situation is forcing them both to navigate years of separation, longing, their shifting emotions. So in this book we have the themes of complexity of love, resilience, identity, and also the impact of an unjust system on personal relationships. I'm only in the beginning of this book, but I will definitely be letting you know my thoughts once I finished it. In 2020, the winner was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Here we have a fictionalized account of the life and death of Hamnet, who was the son of William Shakespeare. The novel explores themes of love, loss, and lingering power of grief. This is interesting because actually Maggie O'Farrell has always been known to me as an author of love stories. I'm sure I've read at least a couple of her books some years back. So I'm quite intrigued to see her writing something a little bit different. This book is not supposed to be difficult to read at all. Maggie O'Farrell's style is described as very straightforward. And so if this appeals to you, then please go ahead and check out this novel. Next, we have again the book that has been talked about so much here on YouTube, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clark. This book won the award in 2021. It is a very well-known book. I haven't read it yet, but I am definitely getting ready for it. So, Piranesi is the name of the key character who inhabits an endless labyrinth-like house and believes himself to be its only true resident. And then he slowly uncovers clues that challenge everything he believes. Now, all the reviews are consistent in that they say the less you know about this book, the better. So that's all you're getting from me. Okay, as we reach 2022, we are down to 3 books. And so in 2022, the winning book was The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. This is set in the US in an unnamed town, and our main protagonist is this 14-year-old Benny who begins to hear voices from inanimate objects, which leads him to question his sanity and reality itself. He finds refuge in a library where books start to whisper wisdom to him, and there he encounters all kinds of eccentric characters. And so we follow his journey as he redefines grief and also his self-acceptance. This book has great reviews from the readers. By the way, it is written in the form of a conversation between the boy and the book, and so maybe that appeals to you. But I will be reading definitely Piranesi first, and I just worry that that may exhaust my capacity to read fantasy novels for this year. Fantasy is not normally a genre that I tend to get excited by, but I do make exceptions for good fantasy novels, so maybe this will be one of them. Sorry, one of my legs fell asleep, so I had to shift slightly. As mentioned earlier, there is one author who won the Women's Prize for Fiction twice, and that was Barbara Kingsolver, and she won her second award in 2023 with the book titled Damon Copperhead. This time she offers us a modern reimagining of David Copperfield. And so, in the story, we follow this main character, a boy who is born into poverty, who struggles against neglect, addiction, and the failures of the foster care system. Despite overwhelming hardships, he finds hope through art, resilience, and through this hope of a possibility of creating a better life for himself. Okay, drums please, because we reached the end with the final winning novel from last year, from 2024, and that book is, of course, Brotherless Night by V.V. Ganeshananthan. Wow, I said it without mistakes. That's a first. If you haven't heard about this novel yet, this is set during the Sri Lankan Civil War, and we follow a young woman, Sashi, who dreams of becoming a doctor but finds her life torn completely by violence and political turmoil. As she witnesses the devastating effects of the war on her family, on her community, and on herself, she finds that she has to navigate her moral dilemmas, the question of how to survive without losing her humanity and without losing her self-identity, which in a way she now needs to completely reinvent. This is absolutely heartbreaking. There are some parts of the story that are extremely difficult to read, but I promise you, you will not regret reading this novel. This is definitely the best book I have read recently. So that's the whole list, and I must say I am glad that I have completed this exercise because I now have a pretty good idea on which books I'll be reaching for, and I hope you do too. And if you found the list useful, then please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video.